Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, there's various awoke movements or people saying they're being woke or awoke or, whatever it is, right? They're waking up. That, at the very basis of that strand, that thread of being awakened is false in the sense, it's false because the people in charge of the movement are telling you what you want to hear. When somebody tells you what you want to hear, for example, Trump and Q. So you have the movements, the Trumper movement and the Q movement. And the reason why it isn't a true awakening is because Trump and Q are pandering to the belief systems of a certain demographic. So it isn't truly waking up because they're lying to you, they're pandering to you, they're giving you information based in a pre-existing belief system where you're the good guy, that you Republicans and you, true Republicans and you are the good guys, and the Democrats, the deep state, the, whatever it is, are the bad guys. And that already existed before. Like you already knew that Hillary Clinton and Soros was a bad guy coming into the Trump era and the QAnon era, right? I mean, most people had that, the people around them, the people that they, identify with, the groups that they are, a part of already believed most of the things that Q put out there, if not in the sense of the detail of the things, but in the sense of it was congruent, it was ego-syntonic with your belief systems. Ego-syntonic and ego-dystonic are words from the psychological community, I guess. This is where I learned them. And they're things that you agree with your ego, right? And so it's ego-syntonic, things that agree with your ego, and ego-dystonic are things that disagree with your ego. And if you're really going to get a dose of truth, you have to be told things that you don't want to hear. And you have to, go through your own internal reconciliation of what you've just learned. And it's going to make you uncomfortable, at least initially. It should make you uncomfortable. And so that's never what happened with Q and Trump, who, Trump was a salesman. He just went along with things. And he said he didn't know anything about Q, and he, consistently dropped information that supported Q drops. And of course, Q is anonymous. When something's anonymous, it's always should be, you should be highly suspicious of it. But Q said things and made promises that never were going to happen. Because I had a QB, an upset QB, leave a comment. I should have saved the comment, but I was busy. And the person said that, I was so hard on QBs and all these things, and that they woke up because of Q. And I'm like, no, you didn't wake up. Like, you still haven't gone through it yet, because there are things you have to deal with that are, fundamental to your personality configuration and your belief system that you have to confront, that has to be gone through, right? It's much easier for everyone to see it on people on the left, right? So on the left, you have these various ways that people say that they're woke, right? Woke to, white male privilege, woke to white male patriarchal, misogynistic beliefs against the feminist women, woke against, any number of demographics, woke against the Trump haters, right? People who realize, in themselves, this is what they believe, that Trump is the devil and Trump supporters are his little, minions, demonic minions, and that, all of these woke groups on the left believe that Trump and the right and, all these people who want to make America great again, and that, group of elderly people are preventing progress because the movement is coming from the youth, and they've been deceived by the Hollywood, they've been told, and you see so many of these young people, many of whom they have conservative parents, but they themselves have been raised by the internet, and they have all these, strong liberal beliefs, and they've been given cultural morality in their culture from Hollywood. Hollywood has believed so many of the things that are now coming out and being put out there. This whole new way of viewing everything, right? The whole way of viewing things that were, the paramount, the pillars of a human social structure. And so much so that you can't really even talk about them now on social media because social media is backing this. And they believe that this new way of, it's an evolution. The evolution of a human being believes these things that they've been pitching out there about, social dynamics and all of it, right? All of the things that they've been selling to their group of people who have always felt that the Republicans and, people in the South or whatever it is, right? People who are, living in rural areas and go to church and these things are the ones holding back the, evolution of consciousness in terms of, everything, right? The Hollywood morality and progress in all kinds of different ways. Scientific progress, again, they believe in science over anything else. God doesn't exist, and science is paramount. And so this is what they've been sold. The same way that, the only difference is that Trump, I think, kind of, for the most part, I think he bought into it. He was playing his role. He started to believe in his role, and that often happens. I don't know what the FQ's problem was, right? I think it's a, psychological operation from the intelligence community. But either way, the people on the left believe in their way of being, believe in what they're doing. The people who are leading the sheep to slaughter on the left believe in this, right? Believe in this agenda. I think most of them, maybe, the higher ups don't. But it doesn't matter because it's not true. It's easy for you to see that they aren't really woke, right? Because they were waking up against power, because there's always power that you're waking up against, right? And so the power they were waking up against was Trump and Trump supporters and their power. And they've had all this power, the misogynistic, chauvinist males and the racist males or whatever. It's each demographic has their, specific enemy, the specific villain, the so-called the man, right, in air quotes. But in either case, it's easier for most of you to see it in the left because, that's the group that you're against. But either case, the problem with these false awakenings is that you're not being told things. They're not telling you things that you don't want to hear. They're telling you things that are egocentric to your pre-existing belief system. And so you're not having to confront yourself or change, and you're believing in something that isn't true because they're pandering. They're pandering to your group. That's what happens with politicians and everybody. Like they break off a segment of the population. This happens in the truth community because there's various demographics in the so-called truth community. And if you want to be more successful, if you want to have more, followers or whatever it is, right? More subscribers, you have to fit the mold of one of these belief systems, one of these sub-demographics in the truth community. You have to be a Trumper, a right-wing person that makes up, maybe 60% or so of, the QBs and the Trumpers. And I don't consider them true truthers, but they're a demographic. That's the way Alex Jones went because he realized before he wasn't as bad as he is now. But he realized that, because of his whatever, his handlers or because of the amount of money he had to make each month and things because of his operation, he had to go far right. And he went with Trump, and there was all this energy, enthusiasm, and money available for people. Also, being a Christian is important. Like I would have so many more subscribers if I was a Christian. I would say, I don't know, again, 60, 70, 80% of people in the truth community identify as Christian. And so you have these various groups, and I know what people want to hear. Like I can tell from the comments and just in general. And I know there's these templates that go around the truth community that everybody gravitates to. And then they just, they don't change. People just believe things that are false, and people say these things in videos and, comments and like they're fact when they're, disinformation, something people made up, or they're questionable at the very least. They become accepted as reality, as truths. And when you go against them, people flip out because, everyone's so rigid in their belief systems because you haven't been, fully woken yet. That's the problem. you really haven't, woken up yet. You haven't confronted yourself. And, the part of this that, scares you or, upsets you or what you don't want to hear. Because the liberals that have been woken up, the people say they're woke, and the Trumpers and the Cubies that have been woken up all share one belief, and that is you're the good guy. You're part of a good guy group. And the government and the American system is, technically good and sound, but there are these bad guys that need to be rooted out. And so right now, the Democrats and the media have rooted out Trump, and they're trying to root out his supporters and the Cubies. Of course, they have to keep these enemies alive. Americans have been trained always to have an external enemy. When I was a kid, it was the Russians, and then it was Islamic terrorists, and then it was domestic terrorists and the Russians again, and now maybe to some extent the Chinese. But America always has, was the Germans and whoever it was, the Germans before that, right? In World War I and World War II, the Japanese. America always has enemies. Americans have always been given, there are these bad guys trying to take away your American freedoms and things like this. You see it in action movie after action movie. And so Americans are, have this belief to externalize an enemy, just like they have been told to externalize God. That God isn't inside you and your enemy isn't inside of you either. That it's external to you and that you have to go out and project whatever's inside of you outside. And so there's always these enemies, but this is what the left and the right have been told, that there's these enemies, internal enemies, enemies within the country, within the United States, that are preventing this good country, this stable and strong country and system from being great. And that they have a plan to get rid of, root out these enemies with your support, and then America can be great again, or great, for the progressives in a future situation. It's going to evolve into greatness for the left or be throwback greatness for the right. You understand this? The way that each group is being controlled and lied to is that the system itself is good and strong. The system is good for you. The American system is good for you. It's not a systemic problem. And so both Democrats and Republicans believe this for the most part, that there's just some bad apples in there and they have to be taken care of. And that's easy. That's easy for people to believe. That doesn't, have an element where you have to confront yourself, where you have to confront your belief system, where you have to, this is the real problem. This is what really happens when you truly wake up, at least on the, first level of it. And so I had my spiritual awakening when I was 29. And I always knew about a lot of these theories in terms of, the government's doing this and the corporations are doing that or whatever. But it was in, 2005, I believe, when I realized, that the government was evil. And I already knew this to some extent from the Heartless System. I had understood that the system was bad for us, the global system and the corruption of man and things like this was bad. And I knew it from being, an outsider, being a dyslexic person, things my brother had told me, because he had come back from Vietnam and he had delved into some of these truther things about the Federal Reserve and all these things. But it was in 2005 to do with a big event in 2001 where I just, for about 2 weeks I realized the system was completely against all of us. It was hurting us, taking us in the wrong direction. And I had mental knowledge of it before. I knew it mentally, but I really didn't register. And I've talked about this before. I made a whole video about this in one of my older videos about reading the ingredients where, now when you realize, say, GMO foods, when you go into a store, you realize that so much of the stuff they're putting in foods is poisoning you in one way or another. There's, even chemicals and stuff in foods, certainly processed foods. And so you now have to do the laborious task of reading the ingredients on everything to make sure, it might say healthy, it might even say organic on it, but you now have to research because you can't trust the people putting your foods into the grocery store. And, I mean, this is something that's gone on globally where people would use, would be dirty with their foods, whatever it is, farmers, local farmers. I mean, you couldn't trust certain people. You had to trust people to be thorough. In restaurants, you have to trust people. I mean, if someone's a mean person or evil person, they can spit your food or do something bad to your food. I mean, this is how it is. And I've worked in kitchens before, and oftentimes the kitchen staff is so overwhelmed and so angry and hostile because they're working in a hot environment. Sometimes it's like 110 degrees, in a kitchen with the ovens on and all these things. They're sweating under a high pressure environment, and they could be, just a bad person and put bad things or not be careful with your food, and they're putting their energy into your food. That's another thing. When somebody cooks your food, if they have bad energy, they put it into your food. So if you're married to a person that's cooking your food, your mom or your parents are in charge of it, and they have bad energy, they're putting their prana, their energy, their life energy into their creation, their whatever they're cooking. And so, now you have this laborious type of situation where you can't trust the people who are providing your food for you. But then when you can't trust corporations and the government who are giving you everything, just like with, social media, they're spying on you, they have nefarious intents, they're drawing you to their platforms, and then they're getting all your personal secrets, all your personal behavior patterns, things that you don't even know about yourself, and they're accumulating this data to use against you to control you in some way. And so this is on every level. And when you really wake up to this, you realize you can't trust the people who are leading you. They're lying to you. They're deceiving you. They want to depopulate the planet to a certain extent, right? They want to reduce the level of population significantly. And they want to dumb you down. I mean, this is what they've been doing. People have gotten newer and better technology. Our vocabulary is less. Our ability to withstand disappointment or psychological issues or even physical issues. I did a video about this where there's all these young people who have chronic conditions, chronic health conditions, under the age of, 20 and up, it's like 1, and over a certain age, it's like 2 chronic health conditions. And all these younger people saying, yeah, I have a chronic health condition. I have a chronic health condition. And so the Wi-Fi, I've covered this, the electromagnetic poisoning, the psychological makeup of people, all have made people weaker and worse. They have, turned you into less than you would have been 100 years ago. You would have been a much stronger person with better character qualities. And, just going back through history, through the whole Kali Yuga, like at the end of the other Yuga, people were, in pretty good shape, right? They were living much longer than people are now. People used to live thousands of years in other yugas, right? Long periods of time. Life wasn't so rushed. It was completely different than it is now. The Kali Yuga kicks in, and by the end of the Kali Yuga, which we're at right now, people just fall apart completely. And so you have to go through this process where you realize you can't trust your leadership because they're taking you in the wrong direction. In terms of your physical and your material lives, your body, your mind, and your material existence, but more importantly, on a spiritual level, they're taking you in the exact opposite direction, away from your soul's path, away from your divine purpose, away from, all the things that are important, truly important, eternally important. And so this system has got to go. And so I'm editing this, and I realized, I'm just listening to it, but I am aware of that I didn't complete my point, that at first you have this idea that you have to read the ingredients on foods. But then when you realize the system itself is deceptive, not all the time, and that's the problem. It's not all lies. It's not 100% illusion. It's lies mixed with disinformation or withheld truth, right? Obscurantism, that's how you say it. 3 tries. And so you have to read the ingredients on everything. And that was the point of this video I made. One of my, videos I remember. Like I made it maybe 5-6 years ago. But I was very clear that I made like a series of read the ingredients. Because you always have to read the ingredients and try to figure out what's true and what's not, as opposed to people who can just trust the system. People who are in the matrix, life is a lot easier. They just trust the system. Okay, this is what you do. Good. Put on your mask. Take this. Take that. Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. It's easy. Right. You just allow somebody else to make your major decisions for you. You just do the research that they give you, and you say, okay, thank you. I'll take this. I'll do this. This is good. Thank you. I trust you. I trust you. I trust you. And you're in a state of ignorant bliss. And once that is shaken up, once you have some awakening, you don't have that anymore. And so many of us suffer from this, right? And it becomes something where you can get paranoid, you can get, so totally stressed out all the time. It becomes a difficult process, not trusting the system. There's a great song from Pearl Jam about sexual abuse, and there's a great line from the song Daughter where he says, she holds the hand that holds her down. And I think that's, all of us, when we recognize that, the system that we're 100% dependent on isn't trustworthy, and then life isn't nearly as good. In terms of the Heartless meditation, you learn to develop your heart as an instrument to make decisions, and it is something used in conjunction with your mind and, your physical reality, but connecting to God on a heart-based level and allowing your heart to be, the guiding light to your life is something that develops after some period of time, which eases the burden because, again, there's so much lies and disinformation out there. It's hard to make decisions. It's stressful. And that's the exhausting process of constantly having to read the ingredients instead of just, trusting the system, trusting the people that run the system to be good people and do what's in your best interest. And they're not doing that. If you haven't woken up to that, it's not just one group of people, it's the system itself. It's a systemic problem. The system always blames individuals. I've talked about that so much, right? They blame, on the psychological level, they blame the person, not the system. The system is never at fault for you being crazy, and yet everybody's crazy, right? They talk about this group's crazy, everyone's crazy. You go in there, anybody can get a diagnosis in the DSM-5, and yet they never blame the system. It's got to be the system, right? If we're all crazy, the system's making us crazy. The electromagnetic frequency, pollution, all these things, the culture, the hedonistic culture, the money, all of it, the lack of a good connection to God, our religion's being sold out. It's got to be all these things, the system, right? No, it's you. You're broken. Yeah, but everybody's broken. Yeah, that's how it works. You're flawed. You're a sinner, right? You're crazy. Yeah, but it's the system, right? No, it's not the system. It's you. It's you. It's everybody. It's you individually and everybody else individually. Okay, right? Read the ingredients. And then there's another level of waking up, and because of being a homesteader, when I was having this, awakening to the nature of the beast, the nature of the system, that when I was a homesteader, I realized how much I was dependent on, how much we all are dependent on the beastly system. The beastly system is, we're 100% dependent on it. And you can get less dependent on it, but unless you're 100% not dependent on it, right? If you get 20% free of the system, you grow your own food and you do some things or whatever. But if you really can't conceive of living without electricity, living without a car, living without any of these modern conveniences, living without the internet, living without a job, because your job is oftentimes your purpose, because people spend more time at their job than they do with their family and other things, right? So for so many people, their job is their purpose. When they retire, this happened to my dad, they fall completely apart. They have, my dad complained about his job and his commute to work, and he couldn't wait to retire. He had this pie-in-the-sky idea of playing golf every day, which he sucked at and really didn't enjoy. And he really didn't have friends. And so, he was basically watching TV all the time, and he had no purpose, and he fell apart. You watch people retire when their life's work is no longer there, For my mom, my mom's life work was probably keeping my dad going. And so after my dad died, I thought, oh, she'd get a break, right? She complained about him all the time, and she was dead within a year, a little over a year. And she fell apart physically. She was never the same because she didn't have a purpose, like keeping him going and taking care of him. As much as she resented that, was what kept her going. And so when you don't have any work anymore and you just have endless, this idea of retirement, watch what happens to people when they retire and they don't have a purpose. And so when the system collapses, if the system collapses, and you don't have a purpose anymore, like you don't have goals, like, you don't have, I'm going to own my own home or whatever it might be. You don't have, these goals, these financial goals, these career goals and things in life. And so those are all tied into the system. So it's not just about being dependent on, the services the system provides and the government that protects you and all these things, or you think protects you. It's about, your reason for living, your reason for being is tied into the beast, right? And so when you're that dependent on something and then you realize it's evil and bad for you, I mean, its essence is evil and it's bad for you, then you go through something. You no longer believe it can be fixed, and then you're in the unknown because what's going to happen afterwards? You don't know what the situation is going to be afterwards, and you're going to have to adapt and learn everything all over. And the older you get, the harder that is. Like for me, I mean, I've homesteaded and I've been aware of this for so many years, and I have some, level of skills, and I have my connection to God to help guide me through. But, life without the conveniences that the system has given us, running water people don't appreciate, and all the things that make life easy, grocery stores full of food and things that have been harvested for you, and, all these ways of life is just not so hard. I mean, it's hard because it's stressful and unnatural, but it's easy, and we have all this free time, and we don't have to, be as proficient at so many different things, which we're going to have to be in terms of gathering food, in terms of making clothing, in terms of when you have to do it all yourself and you don't have a system and corporations and manufacturing that does things for you, right? Now you have to do it yourself. You have to, have some specialized skill in your village as well as being a multi-functioning person on all levels. It's a huge leap. And just everything. The energy changes. The reason for your existence changes. Everything becomes more important locally. And then just, how much time do you spend on the internet? How much time do you spend watching TV? All these things disappear. Like, what are you going to do with yourself as well? And so when you get, habituated and you're an older person, you don't have that flexibility anymore, physical flexibility to endure, all these things. You just want to have a routine. Human beings like routine, and creating a routine post-apocalypse, post the collapse of the system, and figuring out what your new routine is. And it's, much more extensive, and when to harvest the crops, when to plant the crops, all these things you're going to have to, learn on the fly when everything goes down. And so, once you realize that, it becomes scary. It just becomes unsettling. Even, when you are through the shock value of it, just on a daily basis, imagining life without the beast, without the system, becomes something that's destabilizing. And if you're a person right now going, well, that's not going to happen. That can't happen. Trump's going to Q's going to save us, or whatever. Liberals are going to save, Joe Biden's going to save us, whatever people, whatever they view this as. You haven't gone through it. You haven't woken up to the reality that we're at a time, and it might, be delayed to some extent, and we might skate out if we're old enough. But you younger people are going to see this for sure. I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in degrees. The global reset is a change to the system, which is going to be destabilizing. People are going to flip out. The controllers know it. Whatever, those things that they're doing, last-ditch efforts to try to save their power and control. But God has already ruled, right? This is already, the system is going away. There'll be some, new systems, better systems, possibly, if people accept them. I mean, there's, all these problems with human beings. There's just basic flaws in the genetic structure and the psychological structure of human beings. I mean, the Heartless System talks about like a spiritual mutation that's going to happen on a genetic level. That's going to, until that happens, there's not really, you have limited amount of what you can work with personally. But that's, that's going to be, I mean, anything like that's, think about what it's like for a butterfly, caterpillar to change into a butterfly, or a tadpole to change into a frog, right? And those things happen naturally, and it's been done before, right? It's there's a metamorphosis that's happened over and over again in the, moth and caterpillar and frog and, newt. There's these newts, these real cool newts I like that are, they're called the red spotted newt that's in the eastern coast, the East Coast. In the West Coast, these similar looking newts are poisonous, but in the East Coast, there's these orange newts with these red spots on their back. I've got pictures of them, and they used to, walk across the terrestrial areas, and you just find them. Every once in a while, I'd find one just walking along. These tiny little brilliant orange newts, and I think that the birds may think they're poisonous. I don't know. But they have a 3 process. They're a tadpole, and then they become this, this walking newt that's terrestrial. So they live in the water, and then they just walk across the forest or, farms and things like this. And then they return and become a salamander. They get bigger, and they grow another like inch or two, and they go back to the water. They still have the red dots on them. So I've seen the salamander and the newts have just this brilliant orange color. I'll find a picture and hopefully remember to put it in here because sometimes I don't. Maybe I'll make it the picture for the whole video. I have some pictures of it. But anyways, and actually some video maybe. But anyways, these newts are, an example of a 3-process transformation or metamorphosis. But human beings, the transformation that we're going to have to undergo to evolve to a higher level of consciousness and a genetic level that resonates on a more divine level, it's going to be a difficult transition because things like that always are. They just are because they're changing, they're unknown, there's just pain for change and growth like that. Every metamorphosis or transformation that you've had in your life has come with a price of, some pain in it. You have these years, the teenage years and various years where there's some sort of transformation. I mean, even being born itself is a traumatic and, difficult process, painful process, for the mother, even for the child who is being squeezed out of a water environment where it's living, just swimming along every day, right? Nothing, just completely enclosed, completely, isolated and protected. And then it's out in the world, right? They used to slap you on the ass, you start crying, welcome, Johnny, good luck, Johnny, you whack. And so, I mean, all these things are difficult. They're painful. And so for those people who haven't gone through this process of understanding the systemic nature of the problem, and it isn't your, the enemies that you've been given your whole life or the enemy that you've been given now by Q or Trump or the liberals or the Bidens, saying that Trump's the enemy and the Trump supporters and the QBs are the enemy, and the QB saying it's a deep state. You have some externalized problem. Each person has to realize their connection to the system, how it's negatively affected you, how it's brought you in the wrong direction, how it's disconnected you from your family and God, and you start having to, change all those things. You have to change. Like, you have to frickin' change. And that's what I say consistently here. It's one of the things about the Heartless System that, there's the services of the system, the cleaning and transmission that work. But in terms of what you're going to meet in life, in terms of your experiences, you have to change things. It's said over and over again. You have to build good character qualities, and that's on you. Like, nobody can do that for you. And there's lots of things about the Heartless System that you're told, things that you don't want to hear. And more often than not, people quit over things like that. People have been doing it for 20 years and they love the transmission and they know it's the goal and the right path. And, their ego gets dinged up and, something happens that they attribute to the master of the system, the president, instead of realizing it's something internal to themselves, right? that's just being reflected back on them. The master of the heartfulness system is somebody who becomes a mirror in the sense that anybody that comes to them, they reflect back what the person has to change and grow and things like this. The master of the system doesn't have a choice but to do that. Like, they don't even do it consciously. If a person needs to hear something or needs to, have it reverberated back to them in some way, so they confront something that's preventing their spiritual journey. And oftentimes the person blames the system or the master of the system, but in reality, they're doing them a favor, right? A true friend, Trump isn't being your friend, neither is Q, when they tell you things you want to hear. When what you need to hear is you have to change. And when they tell you things like, no, you've been fine this whole time, it's these other guys over here, let's focus on them, let's change them, let's, go after them, you're perfectly fine. You don't have to change at all. And so, that's never gonna be what you need to hear. I mean, that's why people come and they go for my channel so frequently, because I don't check all the boxes for them. I don't pander to people. I just do my job like I'm in service to God or whatever, right? I mean, there's viewers here, and I need viewers to keep on going, but they'll come and they'll go or whatever, right? I just have to be true to what I'm supposed to do here. And if I'm doing that, I know that people are going to be upset. They're going to leave. They're going to, they're not going to, they're going to find some way to project their butthurtness on me instead of themselves. Because if you're emotionally upset by something, that's happening inside you. The catalyst for that, whatever that might be, is inside of you, right? And so people can pull your strings. They can, make you angry. They can make you upset. They can do things, but it's because it exists inside of you. Pulling your strings means that something exists inside of you, and they're able to resonate and make that thing, that flaw, that, weakness in your system, and expose it, right? And then you have the ability to say, oh, I have this weakness, I better do something, and you clean it out and you move forward. And that's what everybody has to learn to do. Instead of looking like, oh, I have to go silence this thing and get rid of it, whatever it is, externally to me, destroy it, kill it, whatever. I mean, that's what Trump is saying to you. Now, let's just get rid of this, these people in the deep state and all these things. And, the system isn't just one group of bad people. The whole political system's corrupt. The whole monetary system, religious system, and corporate system are all corrupt, right? On a God level, on a military level, on a food level, on a, psychological level, on a social level, on everything, right? And so, yeah, we're going in the direction with the left, and they, they're in this false belief that this Hollywood morality is progress, right? And, we can see that it's not. But we can't go back to the way people think it was better, because it wasn't better, right? There was always elements of deception. I mean, chemicals used to be served for breakfast in the commie-hating right-wing religious days. I mean, all these things were accepted. People, DDT is good for me. I just covered that in another video. And so if someone's going to be a true friend, they're going to tell you things you don't want to hear. They're going to, not in a way like they're just angry at you and they're just like, oh, I want to just, get that a-hole, right? I mean, in terms of you ask them a question, the easy thing for them to do is agree with you. Yeah, F that, biatch, right? She's a, she just broke up with you, F her, she's completely wrong, let's go get drunk, right? That kind of thing. Yeah, that's easy to do. But to tell you, look, you're kind of a jerk and you're not really a good, significant other to somebody, you're not a good husband, and you spend all your time focusing on yourself, and you don't give her any, love and give her the things she needs, and now she's dumped you. She was a good woman, you were lucky to have her, and you were underperforming. Go, do a better job, right? Like, that's not what you want to tell your friend, right? It's easier like just, yeah, bitches, right, man, let's go. Yeah, F them, right? That doesn't help anybody out. I mean, it's the same thing for women. Like, you have to, a true friend will tell you, yeah, you didn't do a good job, right? You failed, and now you're being left. It isn't because of, the person loved you and you didn't give them enough to keep them staying with you, right? You pushed them away and you were too selfish. And I mean, pretty much that's the answer when there's a breakup. Like you could pretty much say that as a blanket statement that you were too into yourself, you didn't give the person enough, and you need to change, and you could still, if it isn't this relationship, have a productive relationship later, but you have to learn to give. Or it's one of these people who is, completely helplessly in love with a bad person who takes advantage of them, and no matter how much love you give them, they're never going to be good enough for you. And that's, more for women than men, but, it's still often it's a narrative for men as well. And then your friend has to tell you, look, you keep on going for people who are bad. You don't read them correctly. You imagine qualities that they have that they don't. You're attracted to negative people, and they're never going to be what you need them to be, and they're always going to take advantage of you, break your heart, and leave you. And so you have to change. What's inside of you that needs to be removed? What do you have to change about yourself inside so that you can find somebody that loves you? What kind of guilt and self-hatred you have inside yourself that you just keep on going for people that are, going to punish you in some way? Like, what have you done? What do you hate about yourself that you fall in love with people like this? So there's always, these are the answers. There was a great interaction. The guy who I got my first meditative sittings from, it used to be you'd go to somebody's house in the Heartless System, and you'd get 3 sittings on 3 consecutive days, at least 3 sittings. Babaji, the second master of the system, once gave somebody 24 of these sittings. And the 3 sittings, the first one are completely cleaning, and then you receive the first transmission in the 3rd sitting. There's transmission in the first 2 in terms of, the transmission's used to clean somebody's heart or whatever and read the person's condition. So there is transmission given, but not in the sense of that it's directed to, in the Heartless System, it's always cleaning and transmission. So there's cleaning done where the preceptor or the master of the system goes inside your internal condition, your internal structure, and cleans away grossness and some scaras. And then whatever space has been made available, depending on the intensity of the cleaning, there is transmission given. And so when I got the sittings from the master of the system, Master Charji, 3 sittings from him, and I believe 5 sittings from senior members of the system, it was so deep cleaning, like I can't even express it. There was these gatherings that we had, these 3-day gatherings back when I was a trainer, and then as just doing it with regular practitioners, that we would get 3 sittings on one day. And by the last sitting, the cleaning had gone so deep, and I just felt wonderful. I was hoping they would continue that or whatever. But anyways, so I went over to this guy's house and got these sittings, face-to-face meditations where the person reads your internal condition, transmits, and then cleans out what needs to be cleaned out, and then the first transmission is given in the 3rd sitting. And so that's how I started. That's how it used to be. Now you can start on these YouTube videos, and it's a much more it's easier for people to start because it's like there's a growing what they call egregore, group consciousness, and people are waking up to the spiritual aspect of things. And so now it's easy for people to feel the transmission and things. Things have evolved in the Heartless System. But anyways, I used to, go to this guy's house. He lived about a block or 2 away from me. And he'd tell me stories of his time in India with Master Charji. And he used to go to Babaji's house back in the 70s. This is years and years ago. The people would go to Babaji's house in the 60s and the 70s, even the 50s, European people, Americans. And they'd stay there. They had, very uncomfortable accommodations in terms of American, American standards. But they'd go and stay there, and they'd sit outside. Babaji would smoke his hookah, and he would read people's spiritual condition and sometimes answer questions. And so he said one time he brought a picture. He kept on bringing pictures of girls, right? So he was dating different women, and he wanted to get married. It was a big thing. It's a kind of important thing in the Heartless System as well. All the masters of the system are married and have families. It's, it's one of these things where there's no priest class. Everyone is supposed to live a normal life with a job and a family and things like this. All the masters of the Heartless System had careers and families and things. And so this guy wanted to get married, and he brought this picture. He'd go to India and he'd bring different pictures of girls he was dating or whatever. And he showed Babaji this picture, and Babaji almost never said anything negative about people. Like he just, like I said before, he was a candle, so he would always see the saint in people. He was always looking at you as a potential saint. he was always looking at you as a potential spiritual being. He was looking at your potential and your best, and it was his job to help bring it out and pull it out of you. And so he looked at the picture and he just unloaded on this young girl, right? You know, and this guy with Fred, this guy, I started with, was like stunned. And he was a little bit, he looks kind of a, one of those people's a little bit in a daze and just a little bit clueless, right? And so he's, he's sitting there. He's never heard Babaji say anything negative about anybody. And he just unloaded on this woman. And he said, I went back home and everything that Babaji said ended up being true. Like everything he said about her, he could now see it. And under, in terms of when the relationship ran its course, he saw that like she was a horrible person, right? But after he looked at the picture and said all these things, Babaji said, I can clean your marriage samskaras. And this guy, Fred, he's telling me the story and he goes, no. I said, no. And I go, Fred, he didn't mean that you weren't going to get married at all. He just was going to clean the bad stuff. And Fred goes, yeah, I know that now. Right? Like then I didn't realize that, because I wanted to get married. I said, no. And I was like, yeah, you should have said yes. And then he had these like series of bad marriages because he had bad marriages, some scars. And Babaji offered to, relieve his burden, but he never did, But again, just restating this, in the heartfulness system, the world shows you things through your meditation, through your experience of things in your system that need to be removed that are blocking your spiritual evolution. And on a spiritual level, the samskara can be cleaned, the impression, these are past impressions, but then you have to, clean it for yourself. Another example of this is Master Charji, as a young man, had tried to meditate and it didn't have a good system. And he developed this fear of being alone. And it was, very, more than just that, destabilizing stuff. And it was stuff that Babaji had to fix. But there was also just regular fear in his system. And he would go to Babaji and Babaji would give him sittings and say, I've now cleaned 5% of your fear. I've removed 5% of your fear from your system. And Charji one time said, stop with all these percentages, just clean it all, right? And so Babaji said, all right. So they sat in meditation and Charji had this experience of this dark face that was just like his, right? Be removed. Like it was, a shadow. And he just felt really good, right? And thing was just removed. And Babaji said, I've cleaned all your fear, but your mental attachment to it or whatever. He said, I don't know exactly how he phrased it, but your mental, the mental fear is still there. So don't recreate it, right? Don't recreate it emotionally based in your mental memory of the fear. And so people have this negative attachment. People want negative things. They, are attracted to people that lie to them. They're attracted to false gods and false, bad relationship partners and, business partners. I mean, people are attracted all the time to people that do them harm, right? Bad people. And, they follow them or they, they're led astray. And when you try to tell them, they get mad at you. And, that's the thing about people who are in a cult. You try to tell them and they're, they get, they have all these defense mechanisms, right? Trust the plan, right? They have all these ways that they are, their minds have been framed and warped and, they want it, right? That's what they want, right? They want to be a part of a group. They want to be deceived and, and so to really wake up, it stings, right? To really go through an awakening process, you have to confront the problems and the things in yourself that you don't want to see. You have to, own up to those things. And I've been through, at least some of that, and it sucks, right? It's not, it's not, a thing that's pleasurable, but on the other end of it, you always feel better. It's something good to go through. In the heartfulness system, it's in part to the system. There's lots of people who do the heartfulness system that don't get this, right? They still think of themselves as a victim. They still think of themselves as, that there's random things happening to them and, woe is me and all these things, instead of realizing that God's showing them, the master of the system and God is showing them, and their soul is showing them the things in themselves they have to confront and deal with. And that's happening on a daily basis for everybody, but very, much more so for people who do the heartfulness system because it's a spiritual, it's a spiritual activation process that's happened. And then you have to start changing. You have to start adapting and changing, becoming something better. Anyways, those newts, I just was, those red spotted newts. Again, you can't pick one up in the western part of the country. They're different newts. They're poisonous. They're toxic in the west, but they're considered miracle newts. I used to be into all these different animals. There's these druid oracle animals, and there's shamanistic animals in the Native American traditions. And these animals, when you see a certain animal, like you're out in nature and you see something, right? And it has a certain quality. It has an essence, and it's there to teach you something. And they used to believe in, animal gods and things like this, and they have specific qualities. And newts are supposed to bring in miracles, right? They're supposed to be miracle newts. So anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano. Definitely reporting from the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.